Once upon a time in Cape May, there lived a beautiful African-American girl named Ivy Johnson. Ivy came from a loving Christian family. Her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, taught her about God, moral character, and to always follow God's path. Ivy was a bright and kind-hearted girl. She loved going to church, singing hymns, and reading her Bible. But when she started high school, things began to change. Ivy made new friends who didn't share her Christian values. They were always talking about parties, breaking rules, and living wildly. One of these friends was a girl named Lisa. Lisa was fun and exciting, but she didn't care about God or the Bible. She convinced Ivy to come to a party one Friday night. Ivy knew it was wrong, but she wanted to fit in and have fun like everyone else. Soon, Ivy started going to more parties. She stopped going to church and reading her Bible. Her parents were worried. They could see Ivy changing, but no matter how much they prayed and talked to her, she wouldn't listen. Ivy was too deep into her new wild life. One night, Ivy met a boy named Jake at a party. He was handsome and charming, and Ivy quickly fell for him. They started spending a lot of time together. But Jake wasn't a good influence. He encouraged Ivy to skip school, lie to her parents, and do things that made her feel guilty and ashamed. A few months later, Ivy found out she was pregnant. She was scared and didn't know what to do. When she told Jake, he panicked and abandoned her. He didn't want anything to do with the baby or Ivy. Ivy was heartbroken and felt completely alone. Ivy's wild life had led her to a place she never thought she'd be. She felt ashamed, scared, and lost. Her friends who had led her astray were nowhere to be found. They had betrayed her and left her to face the consequences alone. Meanwhile, her parents never stopped praying for her. They trusted that God would bring Ivy back to the right path in His own time. They continued to show her love and support, hoping she would find her way back to God. Ivy had a hard road ahead of her. She had to deal with the consequences of her choices and find a way to rebuild her life. But deep down, she knew her parents were right. She needed to turn back to God and seek His forgiveness and guidance. As a single mother, she faced many challenges. She had to drop out of high school to care for her baby girl, Hope. Every day was a struggle, filled with sleepless nights and hard work. Ivy felt overwhelmed and alone. She had no job, no friends, and no future. But in her darkest moments, Ivy remembered her parents' teachings about God's love and mercy. She kept praying again, asking God for help. One night, after putting Hope to bed, Ivy knelt down and prayed with all her heart, "Dear God, I know I've strayed far from your path. Please forgive me and help me find my way back to you." The next morning, something incredible happened. Mrs. Johnson found Ivy crying in the living room and hugged her tightly. "Ivy, my dear, we never stopped loving you. And neither has God. His love is endless, and His mercy is great. He will help you through this." Ivy began attending church again. She felt a warmth and peace she hadn't felt in a long time. She listened to sermons, read her Bible, and prayed every day. Slowly but surely, Ivy felt her faith returning. She felt God's love surrounding her and giving her strength. One Sunday, Ivy felt a strong calling in her heart. She felt God was asking her to share her story and help others who were lost like she had been. She talked to her pastor, and he encouraged her to follow God's call. Ivy started studying the Bible more deeply and took classes at the church to become a pastor. As Ivy's faith grew, so did her desire to help others. She reached out to her old high school friends, the ones who had led her astray. It wasn't easy. Many of them didn't want to listen at first. But Ivy didn't give up. She prayed for them, shared her story, and showed them God's love and forgiveness. They saw the peace and joy in her life and wanted that for themselves. Ivy's old friend Lisa was the first to come back to God. She cried as she prayed with Ivy, asking for forgiveness and a new start. Slowly, they started coming to church and turning their lives around. Ivy's life was truly transformed. She became a pastor at her church, sharing her story in God's love with everyone she met. Her parents were overjoyed and proud of the woman Ivy had become. They took care of Hope, teaching her about Jesus Christ and God's love, guiding her in the Christian faith. Ivy found love, mercy, and a new purpose in life. She became an example of hope for others, showing that no matter how far you've strayed, God's love can bring you back. Now, Ivy in her early 30s, has become a beloved pastor in her community. Her church grew, and many people were touched. Jake, the boy who had once abandoned Ivy, had undergone a transformation of his own. He faced many hardships and challenges, which eventually led him to seek a new direction. One day, feeling utterly lost, Jake wandered into a church. The pastor's sermon that day was about God's forgiveness and the chance for a new beginning. Deeply moved, Jake decided to give his life to Christ. Jake's journey of faith was not easy. He had to confront his past mistakes and seek forgiveness from those he had wronged. He moved to New York to start fresh, found a job, and became an active member of his church. Over time, Jake grew in his faith and became a strong follower of Christ. He prayed daily and sought to live a life that honored God. Jake felt ready to find a partner who shared his faith and values. However, he faced rejection from many women. Despite this, Jake remained hopeful and continued to trust God's plan for his life. He prayed to God to lead him to the right person. One day, Jake heard about a church singles conference that was going to take place in another state. Feeling a nudge in his heart, he decided to attend, hoping to meet someone who shared his faith and values. Jake took a flight to the state. Little did he know, Ivy was also planning to travel to that state for the same conference. Ivy was excited about the conference. She saw it as an opportunity to connect with other Christian singles and to grow even deeper in her faith. The conference was held at a beautiful retreat center surrounded by nature. Ivy arrived with hope and felt a sense of peace and anticipation. As she settled into the conference activities, she felt God's presence strongly. On the second day of the conference, during a worship session, Ivy and Jake found themselves standing next to each other, neither aware of the other's presence. The worship music filled the room, and everyone sang with heartfelt devotion. As the song ended, the pastor leading the session asked everyone to turn to their neighbor and pray together. When Ivy turned, she was stunned to see Jake. He looked different, more mature, and there was a light in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Jake recognized Ivy immediately and felt a rush of emotions. He knew he had to apologize and seek her forgiveness. With a trembling voice, he said, "Ivy, it's me, Jake. I don't know where to begin, but I'm so sorry for everything." Ivy was taken aback but felt a deep sense of peace. She had forgiven Jake long ago and had prayed for him to find God. She smiled warmly and said, "Jake, it's good to see you. Let's pray together." The next few days of the conference, Ivy and Jake talked, shared their stories, and realized how much they had both changed. Jake told Ivy about his journey to Christ, and Ivy shared how God's grace had transformed her life. They spent the rest of the conference getting to know each other again, this time as two people deeply rooted in their faith. After the conference, Ivy and Jake exchanged phone numbers. Ivy gave Jake access to their daughter, Hope, wanting him to be part of her life. Although Ivy lived on her own, Hope remained with her grandparents, who continued to raise her in the ways of the Lord. Over the next few months, Ivy and Jake chatted frequently, becoming closer friends. They shared their daily lives, faith journeys, and hopes for the future. Jake felt a deep connection with Ivy and spent a lot of time praying about their relationship. One day, during his prayer time, Jake felt a clear message from the Holy Spirit: Ivy was to be his wife. Jake continued to pray, seeking confirmation and wisdom. He didn't tell Ivy about the revelation, wanting to ensure everything unfolded according to God's timing. Eventually, they decided to meet in person again and set a date for Jake to visit Ivy's state. Jake traveled to meet Ivy, filled with anticipation and a prayerful heart. They met at a cozy restaurant and spent hours talking, laughing, and sharing their hearts. As the evening drew to a close, he knew it was time to propose. He took a deep breath, got down on one knee, and said, "Ivy, I know we've both been through a lot, and God has brought us a long way. I believe with all my heart that He has brought us together for a reason. Will you marry me?" Ivy was taken aback. She looked at Jake with mixed emotions. "Jake, I appreciate your proposal more than you know. But I need to be honest with you. There's another man, his name is David. He's Nigerian but was born and raised here in the States. He proposed to me recently, and I've started to develop feelings for him." Jake felt a wave of disappointment wash over him. He had been so sure of what God had told him. But he also knew that if Ivy were truly meant to be his wife, it would happen in God's perfect timing. "Ivy," he said softly, "I understand. I trust that God has a plan for both of us. If we are meant to be together, it will happen." The dinner ended on a bittersweet note. Jake returned home, his heart heavy but his faith unwavering. He knew he needed to seek God's guidance once more. That night, Jake knelt beside his bed and prayed, "Lord, I trust you. I believe you brought Ivy and me together for a reason. Please guide us and reveal your will in this situation." After that evening, Jake tried to keep in contact with Ivy. However, it was clear that their relationship had become strained. Ivy seemed distant, preoccupied with her feelings for David. Jake continued to pray for her and for their future, but as time went on, he found it harder to stay hopeful. Months passed, and although Jake remained friends with Ivy, he felt a growing sense of frustration and doubt. He had been so certain that God had told him Ivy was to be his wife, yet nothing seemed to be going the way he had hoped. Despite his prayers and faith, the obstacles between them seemed insurmountable. One evening, feeling particularly weary and discouraged, Jake knelt down to pray once more. "Lord," he began, "I have tried to follow your will and remain faithful to your promise. But I am growing tired, and my faith is wavering. If Ivy is truly the one you have chosen for me, please, Lord, remove every obstacle standing between us. Show me your will clearly and give me the strength to continue trusting in your plan." Jake felt a sense of peace as he finished his prayer. He knew that whatever happened next, it was in God's hands. He decided to continue living his life, focusing on his relationship with God and serving his church while waiting for God's guidance. Ivy was devastated when David, the Nigerian man she had started to develop feelings for, called her to say he didn't want to marry her anymore. She felt a mix of disappointment, heartbreak, and confusion. She had allowed her emotions to lead her, forgetting to seek God's guidance and wisdom in her decision. In the midst of her pain, Ivy turned to God in prayer. She poured out her heart, confessing her mistake and asking for forgiveness. "Lord," she prayed earnestly, "I am sorry for not trusting you fully. I rushed into my feelings without seeking your will. Please forgive me and show me your plan for my life." Ivy found comfort in trusting God totally. She realized that her journey had been filled with lessons about faith, forgiveness, and the importance of seeking God's guidance in all things. She decided to focus on her relationship with God and wait patiently for His direction. Meanwhile, Jake continued to pray and seek God's will. He had felt a sense of peace after his prayer, trusting that God was working behind the scenes. As he continued to serve in his church and grow in his faith, he remained open to whatever God had planned for his life. The next day, Ivy found herself sitting in her dining room, Bible open in front of her. She was deep in prayer and study, seeking God's guidance and reflecting on the recent events in her life. As she prayed fervently, she suddenly felt a presence, a quiet but unmistakable assurance that God had something important to reveal to her. In that moment, Ivy received a vision. She saw Jake, the man from the other state, in a vision with a look of love and sincerity in his eyes. It was as if God was showing her clearly that Jake was meant to be her husband. Overwhelmed by this revelation, Ivy didn't know how to process it, so she had to confront her recent actions and decisions that had led her away from God's plan. With tears streaming down her face, Ivy continued to pray, pouring out her heart to God. "Lord," she prayed with humility, "if what you have shown me is true, if Jake is truly the man you have chosen for me, please let him call me and propose to me again. Give me the courage to trust your plan and follow your will." As she waited for Jake's call, trusting God for everything. The next day, Ivy decided to go shopping at the local supermarket. As she wandered through the aisles, her mind was still on the vision she had received and the fervent prayer she had offered to God. Just as she reached for a box of cereal, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her heart skipped a beat. It was Jake. With a mixture of excitement and nervousness, she answered the call. "Hello, Jake," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Hi, Ivy," Jake replied, his tone warm and enthusiastic. "I've been thinking about you a lot. I know things have been complicated, but I was wondering if we could meet again." There's something important I want to discuss with you." Ivy's heart raced. This felt like the answer to her prayer. "I'd love that, Jake. When can you come?" "How about tomorrow?" he suggested. "I'll catch the first flight and we can meet at that little cafe downtown." "Perfect," Ivy agreed, her voice filled with anticipation. The next day, Jake arrived in Ivy's state and they met at the cozy cafe. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the soft hum of conversation. They found a quiet corner and began to chat, catching up on the past few months and sharing their hopes and dreams. As the conversation flowed, Jake felt a growing sense of certainty. He had prayed and felt a clear confirmation in his heart. He knew it was time. He took a deep breath, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a small velvet box. "Ivy," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "I've prayed a lot about this. I know things haven't been easy, and we've both had our struggles. But I believe with all my heart that God brought us together for a reason. Ivy Johnson, will you marry me?" Tears filled Ivy's eyes as she looked at Jake on one knee, holding the ring out to her. This time, there was no hesitation. She knew this was God's answer to her prayers. With a joyful smile, she extended her hand to him. "Yes, Jake. Yes, I will marry you." Jake slipped the ring onto her finger and they embraced, feeling the warmth of God's love surrounding them. As they sat back down, they continued to talk, now as an engaged couple, excited about their future together. They discussed their dreams for their life, their plans for their daughter Hope, and their shared commitment to serving God and their community. Ivy felt a deep sense of gratitude, knowing that despite all the trials and challenges, God's grace had brought her to this beautiful moment. Ivy and Jake wasted no time making wedding plans. They wanted a simple yet meaningful ceremony, centered around their faith. With the support of their family, friends, and church community, they prepared for their special day. A month later, on a beautiful sunny afternoon, Ivy and Jake stood before their loved ones and exchanged vows. The ceremony was filled with heartfelt prayers, joyful hymns, and the palpable presence of God's love. As they promised to support and cherish each other, it was clear to everyone present that this union was divinely ordained. After the wedding, Jake packed up his life in his state and moved to be with Ivy. They found a beautiful mansion, a perfect place to start their new life together with their daughter, Hope. The house was filled with laughter, love, and the spirit of God's presence. It quickly became a home where they could grow as a family and as servants of the Lord. Ivy and Jake pastored the church together, bringing their unique strengths and experiences to their ministry. Their passion for God and their genuine love for people attracted many new members to the church. Together, they won many souls for Jesus, sharing their testimonies and guiding others on their own journeys of faith. Their church flourished under their leadership. They hosted community events, Bible studies, and outreach programs, spreading God's love far and wide. The congregation grew, and so did the impact of their ministry. Ivy and Jake found great joy and fulfillment in serving together, and their bond grew stronger each day. They lived happily, surrounded by the blessings of their family. Their life is an example of God's grace, forgiveness, and redemption. If you have been blessed by this video, please like, comment, share and subscribe.